All right, here we are. Hey, Bunker Labs. Hope you are enjoying this Thursday stay at home. But we have brought some knowledge and advice as part of our All In campaign to you. This is the much anticipated town hall with Nick Taranto. Very excited to have him here, but also excited to have our facilitator, the founder of Bunker Labs, Todd Connor. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Liz. Awesome to see you. Thanks for all that you're doing to support the community right now and make sure that we're relevant and answering questions because everyone's got a lot of questions right now. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, for taking time out. And I will let you guys just take it away. And if anybody has questions, I encourage you to drop them into our comment box.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. So I will jump in. Again, thanks to Liz, who facilitates the online digital community, and welcome to all of you who are on the Facebook Live group now, who are veterans, entrepreneurs, small business owners. You might be an angel investor. You might be working for a startup. You might be thinking about starting your own startup. And so we welcome you to the community. We're here to support you. And what I know for sure is all of you are experiencing in some way, shape, or form the reality of this COVID-19 health pandemic, and then all of the economic kind of implications associated with it. So at Bunker Labs, we're really trying to lean into understanding what is happening, how can we support you. There's implications for us, but we're doubling down into the digital environment to have a lot of conversations. We have a conversation today, obviously, with Nick Taranto, who I'll introduce in a moment. Tomorrow, we're talking with the head of the Illinois SBA, who's going to talk about the CARES Act and the $2 trillion stimulus package that's available. We're going to talk to bankers next week about how do you get a piece of that? What does it mean? You know, they're structured as forgivable loans, but there's a lot of detail. You've obviously heard about it. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, and then we're going to have a lot of conversations next week. So stay tuned in. We are here to support you. As Liz said, the chat box is open. So if you have questions, just give those to Liz. She'll feed them to us, but we really do want to understand your questions. So I'm talking today to Nick Taranto, who is a legend, I will say, of sorts in the veteran entrepreneurship space. Nick is the founder of Plated, a meal kit delivery company that he started in New York, expanded, scaled, grew, and then ultimately sold to Albertsons, which is a grocery store parent company with grocery stores across the United States. So had a really exciting and climactic year last year in closing out that transaction. Lots of hardship along the way of growing and scaling a company, which I think Nick is available to talk about and share some of the war stories associated with that, which might be relevant today. And today has a different startup, Canopy. So I just want to say, Nick, welcome. Thank you for spending some time with us. He's also on the board of Bunker Labs, so he is a board member of this organization, this national nonprofit. So Nick, welcome. Tell us two things to get us started. What is Canopy, the business that you're running now, and also like what's going on in your world, in your life? Just give us a snapshot.
Yeah. Well, Todd, thanks for facilitating, and always good to chat with you. You know, we've known each other now for 6 years going on, and been a part of the Bunker community for just as long, and continually amazed that every time I blink, Bunker's 5 times as big, and budgets doubling year to year, and just surrounded with amazing people. So always really proud and happy to talk to you and do anything to support the community. So I've had a really interesting last, call it three months and change. We sold Plated, our business, in 2017. I'll give you an abbreviated backstory. I stuck on for about a year, and then I transitioned out and spent some time consulting, doing some angel investing, some early stage company advising. And then in about a little over a year ago, early 2019, started a new business called Canopy Club, which was essentially a social play for baby boomers. The thesis being that as people are downsizing, approaching retirement, re-urbanizing, selling their house in the suburbs and moving back into the city, there's this epidemic of loneliness amongst that population. And we were building a physical space and a digital community to support those folks. So we raised about $4 million to do it. We had a space open in New York. We moved very quickly to do that last year. But the data just wasn't looking good. And when I was doing my kind of year-end review, end of 2019, I came to the conclusion that there just wasn't enough traction there to justify continuing to run the business. So first week of January, made the tough call to basically shut the business down, and spent the last 6 weeks or so in conversations with investors, returning as much money as possible, figuring out how to structure a deal so we could land the plane as best as possible. And literally today and tomorrow, finally putting a bow on all of that. So that was a really interesting, chapter to come off of a big win, go into another entrepreneurial venture, and pretty much fall flat on my face, right? Just get punched in the face really hard. The silver lining here, if you could even call it that, is if I hadn't made that call in late December, I would not have had the runway to figure out how to land the plane, return as much money as possible to investors who want it, and roll forward the equity into a new company that will be it's essentially acquiring us. Because with our business model, we had a physical space. We had about 5,000 square feet in Manhattan, which as of 2 weeks ago would have been completely shut down. We would have had no members coming in, no revenue coming in, and our plan was to go and raise more money end of Q2 in our operating plan. So we would have had no operating data, no runway to raise money, and the capital markets are totally frozen. So it's a bit of a blessing in disguise, because at least I was able to figure something out and not come up with a total donut. So it's been a pretty interesting in many ways start to 2020.
Wow. So thanks for sharing that. What's it like to go from having you kind of have to go back a little bit and say, so Plated spent 6 years building, 6 years, right? Building the business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And obviously a lot of hurdles along the way, but ultimately, success at the end. What inspired you to go start another business, and how do you make the decision to proceed, and then how do you make the decision to pull the plug as you're into it, and as you already are coming in with all this sort of like tailwind of reputational kind of success for what you've done previously? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, part of my realization, leaving Plated and Albertsons was I really loved this game, the early stage venture backed game. And we'll see where the capital environment is once, this crisis is over, but there's still, tens of billions of dollars of capital out there looking for hungry people to go build businesses. And, with a bit of a track record now, I was able to say, look, I've got this idea. It's going into a big market where people have a lot of disposable income, and it can make a really big potential societal impact. And there were people willing to take that risk. And to me, that's one of like the most amazing parts of living in this country, is that you can do that. You can say, I've got an idea. Chances are stacked against you, right? With any new venture, the statistics are not on your side. But if you can make a compelling case, there are people out there that are willing to take that risk. And as long as you're comfortable with the risk and the upside, it's a really interesting game to play. It's a really interesting way to spend a life, pursuing big ideas and just sprinting at them as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, at least for the foreseeable future here, that's how I'm going to spend my my working time, is figuring out ideas that I'm excited about and trying to bring them to life. Mm-hmm. So that was my thought process, call it 18 months ago. It's like, okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff I could go do. And I was thinking of everything from like going to learn to be an iron welder and make large metal installations, to going back to law school and doing some social justice work, to investing full time. But I realized I love building stuff and building teams, and the challenge, and the ability to kind of dream up big ideas and make them come to life. Now, you alluded to the fact that the plated journey was not a straightforward one. I think you've heard a few of my war stories, probably a few too many times at this point. But we came within inches of dying, multiple times, from getting flooded in Hurricane Sandy before we even opened our doors, to having people that were wanted by the FBI stealing money from us, to having tractor trailers full of meat stolen on the south side of Chicago, right? So we just had, just episode after episode of just stuff that, could have crippled the business, coming within hours of missing payroll, right? Just to have a check clear at the very last minute. So it was never an easy, straightforward path for us. But in that business, my business partner and I knew that there was a big market. We knew our product was good. We knew that there was a lot to still figure out, but we knew we had something. With this last business, this Canopy Club business, it became apparent to me as we were starting to get into the market and really, start to acquire customers and really figure out what the product was, that it just wasn't clicking. There are a lot of dynamics that I can get into if it's interesting, that just didn't, we never found that product market fit over the course of about 9 months of really testing, iterating, even pivoting at points to figure out how it would work. And there's a thin line between giving up too early on something that could work, or saying, what, life is short, and I don't really, it doesn't make sense for me to keep smashing my head into a wall thinking that it's gonna break on the next head smash. And again, looking back on 2019 over the Christmas break, it just became apparent to me that we didn't have something that was scalable, and we hadn't found that product market fit. And ultimately, after I made the decision, I felt this huge sense of relief, because it had been a year of just not feeling it, just not getting the flywheel to turn over, and ultimately making that call to return money to investors felt really good.
It's got to be tough though, because you come out of an environment where, as you said, with plated coming within inches of dying several times, and the instinct is push through. But yet in the Canopy Club scenario, the instinct is like, it's time to leave. How do you develop a mental model around how to make those decisions? In the one instance, it really, like, pushing through in spite of the challenges was in fact the right answer. Do you have sort of a red line for, like, here's my go, no go, or is it more, it sounds like it's more intuitive, but how would you advise an entrepreneur on how to make those decisions? What's the difference between perseverance versus throwing bad money after good?
Yeah. So I think you need to look at, 3, maybe 4 factors, right? One is, what's the market saying, right? Are people, if not beating down your doors, at least interested, and, coming and looking at what you're selling? Is the press interested in talking to you or writing about what you're doing? So that's one. That's the market. 2, when you've raised money to go build something, you're a fiduciary. You're a steward of other people's capital. So it's not just, all right, I'm going to take this and burn it to the ground, hoping that something works, but rather, what's the best way to use this capital? And if I don't think there is a way to deploy the capital, then give it back to them. And on that point, I've been very pleasantly surprised by, I thought I was just going to get shat all over for returning 30 cents on the dollar. But to the contrary, a lot of these folks said, really appreciate how you handled this and how deliberate you were in walking us through the decision making, and just the integrity with which you ran this process. Because a lot of times an entrepreneur will just burn it to zero and not really communicate with the investors along the way. So that second point of like being close to your investors and talking to them and having their opinion in your mind as you make the decision. Three is gut, right? What's this little voice in here telling you about what's happening with the business? Like, does it feel like you're on the right path, or is it just a slog that doesn't have much redemption to it? And then the fourth part is the data, right? Like revenue data, retention data, qualitative data that customers are providing. So put those four inputs together, and when I had the time to really synthesize that, it became very clear that backing away was the right decision.
Mm-hmm. How do you think about your next opportunity? How do you go about identifying it? Is it different this time versus how you went to go build Canopy Club? I mean, how would you sort of describe how you'll be going about the next pursuit? Will it involve investors? Will it involve other people? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, so previously we talked about how I kind of feel like this is maybe the only job I'm good at, right? So I don't see myself. I see myself building something else. So I'm in this process now of talking to as many smart people from diverse perspectives as possible to just figure out like what's going on in the world. Where's an interesting place to play for the next 5 years, and where can I bring some of my skills and my passion and interest to the table in a way to create value and have a good time on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. So that's it's an exploratory conversation, and my inkling now is to focus on healthcare. Right, I started getting very interested in healthcare even before the COVID crisis, but it's become very clear that our healthcare system is pretty fundamentally broken, and that there are almost an infinite number of opportunities to go build technology and services, and to just be very clear about what you're trying to change or improve, and then ruthlessly execute against that. And there's so much bloat and there's so much money in the system that there are ways to create a ton of value if you can think innovatively about what the market looks like.
Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about healthcare. I want to ask about sort of the context of COVID-19. So we're, you're at home, I'm at home. We're dressed casually. We're having this conversation, which is something that we wouldn't have done, 6 weeks ago, but we're doing today. Granted, you're not an expert per se, but I consider you someone who's sort of future oriented and thinking about trends. And what's your forecast as to what opportunities open up? What changes permanently, or maybe what goes back to normal? But what would you be, as someone that is an entrepreneur and is looking at this market today, for other kind of aspiring entrepreneurs out there, what opportunities are you seeing on the horizon as a result of this crisis?
Yeah, so I think there are probably at least two buckets there to think about. One is, as you think about building a team, what's become pretty clear to me is that we know we live in an age now where the technology allows us to not have to be co-located all the time, right? There's still no substitute for being in person sometimes, but I think if you are deliberate and you say, okay, once a quarter or once a month, we're going to get together in person and use that time to build culture, then the rest of your time, you can cherry pick talent from, quite literally around the world so that you don't need to be constrained to, the city or town where you're living in terms of building a business. So I think it's incredibly exciting. Mm-hmm. We're seeing right now some cultures and companies thriving because of that, and others just really falling down. So I think, when you think about building a business for the next 10, 20 years, I would look at opportunities that allow you to build a culture and a team in a primarily remote way. It just allows you to tap into talent that otherwise you're constrained by. So I think that's one big one. And relatedly, I think this Zoom platform that we're on now is just one example of an incredible technology that's allowed us to completely transform how we interact. And I try to, we were talking before the video, the live stream started, we were talking about trying to be outside as much as possible. And it's certainly a huge balance for me, right? I'm going to get off the Zoom call and go hug a tree for an hour. But if you think about the opportunities to build off of this type of technology, like just imagine this platform we're on right now and what else we could be doing with it simultaneously. We could have a live scoreboard, upvoting our conversation or downvoting it while we're talking, right? A much more interactive version of news, perhaps, right? You can imagine a news feed directly in Zoom. You're talking about healthcare, and all of a sudden AI is pulling in relevant healthcare pieces, and people who are listening in can click through on those. So to me, like, this Zoom platform is in its very infancy, and there's all kinds of, and it's not just Zoom, but any platform that's really enabling people to connect, in real time without being in the room together is an amazing place to think about, building tools for what work and life looks like in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's we're seeing a lot of conversation across the network around just that if you remove geography as an artificial barrier to where you work, that opens up a whole different aperture, for where you choose to live, where you choose to raise your family, which creates opportunities for hyper-local businesses, and it changes the future of cities. Cities are a construct for needing co-location for work, but if that's not true, then it creates interesting opportunities. So for healthcare, you have an interest sort of in the domain, and maybe there's more that you would kind of hold tight to the vest, but how will you come to a point of view about when to do something, or if to do something? I'm sure you will do something, but as it relates to healthcare, when talk to us a little bit about your ideational kind of business development process. What does it look like to be testing the idea? What things can you determine before you launch the business? And then what things can you only learn once you launch the business is maybe another way of asking the question.
Yeah. So I think in this phase of development process, it's all about developing hypotheses and then testing them as quickly as possible, and testing them against reality, right? Which most of the time means getting in front of a potential customer and figuring out if there's a willingness to pay, and if not, what changes you have to make to get there. So to my mind, it's in many ways starting with not quite a blank sheet of paper, but some different potential areas to investigate, and then talking to as many smart people who are domain experts as possible to figure out what's the landscape look like, what's crowded, where's the white space, who's raised money, what are the experts saying the next few years will look like, and then drilling down in there and having just a ton of conversations to flush out an initial set of hypotheses that you can then go and test in a more structured way.
Mm-hmm. For the investors that you know and are talking to, sort of two questions. One is, what is it that they are looking for when they're making investments? Is it a proven jockey, as in your case, like, hey, this is a guy that has been there, done that, and so he's worth investing in? Is it a big idea that is sort of like as you say, an idea that's in the white space of what could be possible, or is it like, prove to me that the numbers work? What is it that you see in investors for how they think about investing? And then I guess the second question on that is, what's different in this moment, if anything? But what are they, given the current conditions, what's different?
Yeah, so two really good questions. I think on the first one, what investors are looking for, it really depends on what type of investor you're talking to, right? I mean, there's this class of angel investors out there who, and the model with angel investing is, you really need to have a portfolio of, call it 30 or more investments to diversify your risk. And the whole model is based on most of those are not going to work, but you only need one to make a 100x return, and your portfolio works incredibly well. Mm-hmm. And that's the logic behind what a typical early stage angel investor is looking for when they're thinking about technology or something scalable. That is different from angel investors who are looking at maybe investing in a restaurant or like a local demolition business, right? They can be great businesses. They can generate good cash on cash returns with predictable yield. It's not going to ever return 100 times your money, but it's really understanding what kind of business you want to build and where in the ecosystem you want to play and what your level of risk is, right? I mean, for me, I guess I'm a bit of a cowboy, right? Like I'm comfortable saying, if it goes to zero and I have nothing to show after 12 or 24 months, at least I'll have learned along the way and I'll have lessons for the next one. And if it goes to 100, then everyone's going to be pretty happy. And there is what's really exciting to me is that there is an ecosystem in this country that exists to support that. Mm-hmm. To take that kind of risk. The tax code supports it through qualified small business stock exemptions, and the high level on that basically, if you start a new business or you invest in a new business, if there's a liquidity event and you've been involved for 5 years, the first $10 million is completely tax free. So the government really got behind writing good legislation to incentivize people to take risk because there's great return. So that's like in terms of like the earliest stage of finding investment, it really depends on what kind of where your own personal risk tolerance is and what kind of business you want to go build. And then the path basically splits down. Are you taking a somewhat binary go big or go home approach, or are you trying to build something that's doesn't have the same upside potential, but where the risk is also lower?
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. So I know that we've got time constraints, but I want to just kind of ask you one last question before we go, which is just where are you at in this moment of there's a lot of fear out there. We're kind of looking to politicians for leadership or others for leadership, but as we look to the entrepreneurial community for leadership, like where is Nick Taranto at on today's conditions, and what's your forecast? And are you personally optimistic or pessimistic or scared, or what does it mean for you, and what would you share with others?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. The last few days for me have been pretty tough. I mentioned I need my outdoor time to really like level set and get my exercise and just sort of stay sane. And I'm in Los Angeles now, where there's a pretty hard restriction, right? All the outdoor areas, all the parks are closed. So it's been a challenge for me these last few days personally. And I know I've got a lot of friends, especially in the entrepreneurial community, who are really suffering mentally right now. And I think if you're in that boat, it's okay. You know, call up your friends, or if you're not comfortable with your friends, there's sites like BetterHelp or I think I don't want to get this one wrong. I think it's Talkspace maybe. But the point here is if you need support right now, and you know I have the last few days, you know, talk to somebody. So I think like first and foremost, like just acknowledging that like a lot of people are having tough times. You don't need to go through this alone in your own head. In terms of leadership, and you know where my optimism level is, I think it's a pretty you know the decisions that need to get made and should have been made over the last month are leading us down a you know potentially pretty dangerous road, right? You know, the data that came out this morning is that 6.6 million people filed for unemployment insurance this past week, which is about 10 times the previous high prior to this crisis. So we are really in uncharted territory, and we really need leadership at the federal level from the White House and from the Fed to make sure we don't go into you know a decade-long Great Depression, you know, second Great Depression here. I think there's a real risk if we don't get the policy and the you know the financing and liquidity figured out really fast. So I mean I've got what I think are probably some more controversial opinions on how to do that, and we can talk about that if helpful or if of interest. But it's you know. I do not envy the position those leaders are in right now, but there's some really mission critical decision making that needs to be made in the next couple of days here to avoid you know pretty ugly outcomes.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate you sharing that, and honestly, I think that we need to elevate more voices in the conversation for people that see it differently, and I appreciate you doing that, and certainly we want to be a platform for people to stand up and have opinions about how to navigate this moment, but also how do we land on the other side of it. And it is a scary time. It's an uncertain time. I do want to say to everyone who's watching or listening, either live or after the fact, that we have links to resources. So if you need your own emotional support, mental health support, we have links to phone numbers of places you can call for that. We also have a ton of resources listed on our all-in #all-in campaign, which is our response, Bunker Labs response to COVID-19. So on the website, click in. There's instructions there on how to apply for the CARES Act, for the forgivable loans, for payroll continuity, the PPP, which you're seeing a lot about. We're going to talk more about tomorrow. We've got stories of folks like Nick and others who are doing things. We've got small business stories of people that are surviving the moment or trying to survive the moment with bars and restaurants and services. So there's a lot out there. The Facebook community is a live place for you to plug in and talk to other people. Liz Marion, who runs that, can hook you up and make sure that you aren't alone. So yeah, on the note of just amidst the social distancing, just know that Bunker Labs, we want to be a support for you, and we're here for you. And through the down sides of the challenging moments that we're in, but then also hopefully soon on the recovery and the opportunities that exist. So Nick, I want to say thank you for giving us some of your valuable time. As always, it's just it's great to see you, great to hear from you. Glad you're safe, stay safe, and thanks for your time today. And Liz, I'll turn it back over to you.
Just to end on a note of optimism, so it's not all doom and gloom. You know, I do think that this isn't going to last forever, right? We're looking at at most 6 months, which might be a long time, but there is going to be a recovery on this, and I think the entrepreneurial opportunities that come off of this are going to be remarkable. Whether you're thinking about technology or starting a restaurant or a bar or a food truck, once we're all allowed out of our houses again, there's going to be massive demand to get back into the world. So there's reason to be optimistic once we're through this, that things are going to be great again.
That's great. Thanks, Nick.
Nick, I love that we ended on that note, and definitely so much information. Todd, thanks for facilitating and for both of your times. And we're looking forward to tomorrow. That's going to be at 12 p.m. Central Time. So we will see you again right here. Prepare your questions about the CARE Stimulus Act. Thank you both, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks,
Liz.
guys.
Thanks, Nick. See you guys.
Bye.